August 1975. A hot Memphis night. Outside the Graceland gates, an old man strummed a battered guitar. His voice cracked in the dark. Inside, Elvis Presley stopped mid-conversation. He walked to the window and listened. "If you believe music can bridge the deepest loneliness, stay with me." This is the night Elvis Presley stepped beyond the stage lights and into a stranger's life. The beam of a flashlight cut through the dark. A figure froze. A few notes of a song hung in the humid Memphis night air, trembling like they didn't want to be heard. It was just past midnight, August 1975. The air was thick enough to taste warm, buzzing with cicadas and the distant hum of Beale Street. Outside the tall iron gates of Graceland, a wiry man sat on an upturned milk crate, guitar balanced on his knee. The guitar looked older than him. The varnish had long since worn away where his right hand strummed, leaving a pale oval of raw wood. The headstock leaned slightly to one side, like it had been dropped more than once. His clothes spoke of long days and longer nights, faded denim jacket, frayed cuffs, boots with the toes scuffed to the leather. He played an old country ballad, fingers working slow, deliberate chords. His voice cracked in the middle of a line, but he didn't stop. According to the night guard, this was the third night in a row. Always the same. He arrived after the last. Tour bus rolled past, played until near dawn, then disappeared before the morning staff came on. From the upstairs music room, Elvis Presley caught the faintest thread of the melody. At first, it was just background noise, the way you half noticed a train whistle far off. But this wasn't a whistle. This was intentional. He set his own Gibson down, leaned toward the open window, listened. That voice down there. It wasn't polished, but there was something in it. A weight down at the gate. The guard stepped forward, flashlight up. "You can't stay here all." The man kept playing, not looking up. Elvis walked to the door. His friends called out from the den, "Where you headed?" But he didn't answer. On the front steps, the air hit him like a warm blanket. The porch light threw long shadows down the driveway. From here, he could hear the man more clearly. "I hear the lonesome whippoorwill. Sounds too blue to fly." The guard shifted uneasily, ready to wave him off again. From behind Elvis's voice, "Hold up." The guard turned. Elvis stepped into the glow, barefoot, his silk shirt catching the light. He wasn't smiling. Not yet. The old man's strumming faltered for the first time. His head lifted in the dim light. His eyes narrowed like he was making sure this wasn't a dream. Upstairs, the faint echo of a record player needle finding its groove, then clicking off. The whole property seemed to hold its breath. Elvis took a few slow steps toward the gate. From 10 feet away, Elvis stopped. "What's your name?" The man swallowed. "Walter." Bare feet on the gravel. The soft creak of a gate chain swaying. Two men, 10 feet apart, and one song hanging unfinished in the night air from the porch. Elvis could see him clearly now, shoulders hunched forward like the world had been pressing there for years. Walter's left boot tapped slow against the dirt. The rhythm more habit than confidence. The light from the guard's flashlight spilled across the man's face. Weathered lines, a day's stubble. His eyes darted between Elvis and the ground, as though one wrong move might make the moment disappear. The guards shifted, waiting for Elvis's cue to move him along. Instead, Elvis raised a hand, a simple, quiet signal to stay put. This was unusual. Elvis didn't come down to the gate for just anyone. Not at this hour. He took a few steps closer, the driveway gravel cool under his feet. Walter's hands hovered over the strings now. not quite sure whether to keep playing. Elvis stopped just inside the curve of the gate. You were here last night, weren't you? Walter gave a short nod. Didn't think you'd notice. Elvis tilted his head. I notice music. A beat of silence. The cicadas swelled in the background. Somewhere up the street, a lone car passed, headlights flickering through the trees. Elvis's gaze dropped to the guitar, a battered harmony, with a missing pickguard and one tuning peg replaced by a mismatched silver screw. He crouched slightly, eyeing it like an old friend. That thing still holds a tune. Walter's lip twitched into half a smile. Most days. The guard glanced at Elvis, still unsure if this was a conversation worth having. Elvis didn't look away from Walter. Mind if I sit a minute? Walter blinked, like the question needed a second to sink in. Sure, but you're on the other side of the gate. Elvis lowered himself to the ground, cross-legged, leaning his back against the iron bars. The white silk of his shirt caught the faint porch light, making him look almost ghostly in the darkness. Walter adjusted his crate, the scrape of wood against concrete echoing between them. For a long moment, they just sat, two men in two worlds separated by a few feet of metal. You always play out here? Elvis asked. Not always, Walter said softly. Only when I feel like I might disappear if I don't. The words hung between them, heavy and unpolished. Elvis didn't rush to fill the silence. Finally, he nodded toward the guitar. Play something you love. Not for the crowd, for you. Walter's fingers found a chord. The first strum was tentative, then the sound opened up, spilling into the night like warm water. Elvis leaned his head back against the bars and closed his eyes. Halfway through the second verse, Elvis's lips curved into the smallest smile. That's a good song, he said quietly. And then, let's make it better. The first note wavered, the second was stronger. By the third, they were no longer strangers. Walter's voice carried the kind of raw edge you can't fake, the kind life carves into you. Elvis joined in on the harmony without asking, his tone warm, steady, and unmistakable. They were singing Blue Moon of Kentucky, trading verses like they'd rehearsed for years. On Walter's turn, the guitar filled the space between them. On Elvis's, his voice wrapped round the melody, drawing Walter forward. The cicadas seemed to hush when the chorus hit. Out by the street, a couple of late-night fans pressed their faces to the outer fence, whispering to each other, their eyes wide. Inside the gate, Elvis tapped his knee in time with the beat, watching Walter's fingers find their way up the fretboard. You play with your thumb a lot, Elvis said during a pause. Never learned it the other way, Walter replied, a little embarrassed. Elvis grinned. Then don't change it. Sounds honest. They went back into the song. Walter's voice cracked again on the high note. This time, he chuckled and kept going. Elvis matched him, not to show him up, but to carry him through it. According to one of the guards, Elvis asked him quietly between verses, "What's his story?" Walter must have heard, because he answered without looking up. "Lost my wife last year. House is empty now. Guess playing here feels less empty." The strumming slowed. Walter's eyes stayed fixed on the strings. Elvis said nothing for a long moment, just let the words settle. Finally, Elvis leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. "Music's good for that. Keeps you from going under." Walter's grip on the neck tightened, as if the guitar might slip away. They started one last verse. This time, Elvis took the lead, lowering his voice just enough that Walter's could rise above it. When they hit the final chord, Elvis let the sound fade completely before speaking. "You're good," he said simply. Walter laughed once, short and disbelieving. "Not compared to you." Elvis shook his head. "Doesn't matter. You've got something worth hearing." The words seemed to hang heavier than the humid air. Walter sat back on his crate, almost shy under the attention. For a moment, the only sound was the faint hiss of the street lamp above them. Elvis looked at the guitar again, then back to Walter. His expression changed, a flicker of an idea forming. He pushed himself to his feet, dusting off his hands. "I'll be right back," Elvis said, already heading toward the mansion. Walter frowned. "Where you going?" Elvis just turned, his head slightly, that familiar half-smile on his face. That's when Elvis reached for something that would change Walter's life. The front door clicked shut behind him. 30 seconds later, Elvis Presley stepped back into the night, cradling something that caught the light with every step. In his hands was a gleaming Gibson acoustic, rich mahogany body, cream binding. Strings so new they still held the factory shine. Walter's eyes widened. That's a beauty," he whispered. Elvis stopped just inside the gate. "Play it," he said, holding it out through the bars. Walter hesitated. His hands hovered for a moment, almost afraid to touch it. When his fingers finally closed around the neck, the guitar felt solid, alive. He strummed a chord, and the sound rang out warmer, deeper than anything his old harmony could produce. The change was immediate. His posture straightened, his picking hand steadied. Even his voice lifted as he played a quick run of notes. Elvis nodded toward the guard. "Open it." The guard blinked. "Sir, unlock the gate." A metallic click broke the night air. The heavy gate creaked open, and Walter stepped through like he was crossing into another world. Elvis motioned toward the mansion. "Music's better with company." They walked up the driveway together, Walter clutching the Gibson like a lifeline, Elvis moving at an easy pace beside him. The porch lights washed over the marble steps, and when the front doors opened, the warm glow of Graceland spilled into the night inside. The air was cooler, carrying the faint scent of coffee and polished wood. Gold records lined the walls, catching the lamplight in perfect circles. Elvis led him into the living room, where a few friends lingered on the couches. They looked up, eyebrows raised, but Elvis just said, "We're gonna play a couple." Walter sat on the edge of a chair, the Gibson resting against his knee. Elvis picked up another guitar from the corner, a well-worn Martin, and strummed a clean G chord. "Your turn to start," Elvis said. Walter swallowed, then began picking. "Through the intro of Your Cheating Heart." His timing faltered on the second line, but Elvis was right there, filling the gap by the second chorus. Walter's nerves had loosened. He was smiling, actually smiling, as his fingers moved with a confidence he hadn't felt in years. The two of them traded songs, Elvis keeping rhythm so Walter could take short solos. Once, Walter hit a note clean and high, and Elvis laughed in approval. When they stopped, the room was quiet for a beat, then warm applause from the small audience. Walter looked down, cheeks flushed. Elvis leaned forward. "Stay here tonight," he said casually. "You'll have breakfast with me in the morning." Walter blinked, unsure if he'd heard right. "You serious?" Elvis smiled. "I don't say things I don't mean." Walter looked at the guitar in his lap, then back at Elvis. "All right." The smell of bacon drifted through the hallway, before Walter even opened his eyes. For a moment, he didn't remember where he was. Then he saw the Gibson propped against the wall. Morning light poured through the lace curtains, painting pale gold across the room's patterned carpet. Walter sat up slowly, feeling the unfamiliar comfort of a bed that didn't sag in the middle. The events of the night before replayed in his head like a half-believed dream. The gate, the music, the laughter. He dressed in the same denim jacket and boots from the night before. Then followed the sound of clinking cutlery down the hall. The air grew warmer, richer with the scent of biscuits, coffee, and sizzling sausage. In the dining room, a long polished table stretched nearly the length of the space. Elvis sat near the center, coffee cup in hand, his hair neatly combed, but still carrying the ease of mourning. Walter paused at the doorway, unsure. Elvis looked up. "Morning, Walter. Sit." A housekeeper slid a plate in front of him, scrambled eggs, biscuits split with butter melting into the soft bread, thick slices of bacon still snapping faintly from the pan. Walter's stomach tightened from hunger he hadn't admitted to. Elvis poured him coffee, steam curling between them. "You take sugar, too," Walter replied, his voice rough from sleep. They ate for a while in companionable quiet. The clink of forks and the occasional creak of a chair filled the space between sentences. Finally, Elvis asked, "Who'd you listen to growing up?" Walter thought for a moment. Hank Williams, Lefty Frizzle. "My mama liked gospel, so that was always around." Elvis smiled faintly. "Good roots." Between bites, Walter admitted something he'd kept tucked away for years. "I used to play in a little bar outside Tupelo. Nothing big, then life happened, and I stopped. Never thought I'd play for an audience again." Elvis's gaze stayed. "Steady, you just did," he said simply, "and you nailed it." Walter shook his head, smiling but unconvinced. "That was you carrying me." "Maybe," Elvis allowed, "but you kept up. That matters." Breakfast lingered longer than Walter expected, the conversation drifting between music, family, and the small towns they'd both known. At one point, Elvis leaned back in his chair and studied Walter for a long moment. "You got that thing," Elvis said. "Most people don't." Walter looked down at his plate, unsure what to do with the compliment. When the plates were cleared, Elvis disappeared for a moment and returned with the Gibson. In thick black marker, across the body, just below the strings, he wrote to Walter, "Keep playing." EP, he handed it over without ceremony. Walter traced the letters with his fingertips. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Elvis replied. But Elvis wasn't finished. A week later, something else arrived. 7 days later, Walter heard a rumble outside his small house. Not a car he recognized. This one had the deep, slow growl of a delivery truck. He stepped onto the porch, shielding his eyes from the midday sun. The truck backed up to the curb, brakes hissing. 2 men climbed out, each wearing work gloves and carrying a clipboard. "Delivery for Walter," one said. Walter frowned. "I didn't order anything." The men just smiled. "You'll want to see this." From the truck bed, they slid down a large wooden crate, stenciled in black letters, "Fragile, handle with care." The men pried it open with crowbars, and the smell of fresh wood and packing paper drifted into the warm air. Inside was a stage-ready amplifier, still wrapped in protective plastic. Next to it, a gleaming chrome microphone stand, and on top, an envelope with Walter's name in thick, confident handwriting. Walter's breath caught. He knew that handwriting. Hands shaking, he tore it open. On a single sheet of stationery, in blue ink, it read, "Walter, you'll always have a seat in the front row." Elvis for a moment, Walter couldn't move. The sound of cicadas in the trees seemed distant, muffled, like he was hearing the world through water. The delivery men waited until he looked up. "Need us to bring it inside." He nodded silently, stepping back into the cool shadow of the porch. They carried the gear into his small living room, setting it carefully near the window where the light fell just right in the afternoons. On the coffee table, the signed Gibson still sat in its case, exactly where Walter had left it after that night at Graceland. Now, beside it, the amp and mic looked like the missing pieces of a puzzle. Later that week, word got out. A neighbor told a friend, who told a local reporter. By the end of the month, headlines were running in newspapers from Memphis to New York. A black and white photo of Walter holding the Gibson, grinning like a man 20 years younger, ran alongside the story. People began stopping by the community center where Walter sometimes volunteered. "Heard you're playing again," they'd say. So Walter started a weekly set, one night every Friday. No stage lights, no big crowd, just a room of folding chairs and the smell of coffee brewing in the back. He played country, gospel, the old ballads his wife used to hum while cooking, and sometimes, when he reached a quiet verse, he'd glance toward the empty chair he kept in the front row. He never said why it was there, but everyone knew. Walter strummed the closing chord one evening, looked at that empty chair, and whispered, "Thank you, friend. If this story moved you, share it with someone who believes kindness can stop the world in its tracks." Have you ever had a stranger change your life in one night?